Good morning and welcome to this session. Although this format, as Anurag has told us, even during the preparatory session, there are no moderators in this session. So I would not waste time in any opening remarks or anything. Just let's go across in this order. Syed Akbaruddin, our former diplomat and ambassador to UN, then followed by Gautam, then by Manjeet, and then I will make my 1 minute remark at the end of all three of you having done that, and then we will get into the 20-minute discussion. So over to you, Ambassador Akbaruddin.
Thank you, Nitin, and it's a privilege to be among all of you to look at how we reposition ourselves in a new world order. Now, it's a given that the current world order is in disarray. It's also evident that in such situations, states jostle for greater ascendancy. The last time this happened was following World War II. We were not an independent actor then as India, and we are still, what I could say is seeing the impact of what happened then. It's taken us 75 years and we're still struggling to change that narrative. So today, things are different. There's a new India, which is keen to gain a place in accordance with its natural stature globally. And so we have to look at the world very differently. So far, our investments in the global order are minimal. If I take data and try and put this in terms, purely rather crass terms of monetary contributions, we contribute something like 50 million to the UN annually. If I take all international organizations, and I mean all international organizations globally, this figure would rise to something around 70 to 75 million. Now, that's our investment. Now, this investment cannot sustain our goals to be a greater actor on the global stage. Let me just give you some examples of what others' investments are, and then we can understand it. The US, for example, contributes about $3 billion to the United Nations. It contributes $10 billion to global international organizations. China contributes something like $1 billion plus to the United Nations, and if you take all global organizations, it will be double that. Germany contributes something like $7 billion to global international organizations. Now, in that competition, where are we with 75 million? So if we have one big audacious idea that I would like to throw is that we need to ramp up our investments. Like it happens in all institutions, you invest more, you will reap later. So if I have to give you one suggestion of what India needs to do is that we need to ramp up our investments on global international organizations, say by a factor of 10. And I leave you with that thought, and I'm ready to answer later on. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Over to you, Gautam. We are talking about repositioning India in the world's eyes.
Yeah, the opening remarks were fantastic, and I think my big idea flows from and strengthens Akbaruddinji's. As an idea, grand strategy. I'm going to talk about why it's important for India now to have a grand strategy. As an idea, grand strategy will find a new expression in the first half of the 21st century, globally and in India, in large nations as well as small. They will be forced to do this. It will be a precursor to the creation of a new world order. This new world order will be shaped by two competing ideologies, the democratic and the authoritarian. And as we all know, the fundamental designs of these two opposing ideas will be created by the US and China. India's grand strategy will be shaped by many of these conflicting grand strategies. These will include engaging with the grand strategies of the US and China, of course. But equally, India will need to intersect and influence the grand strategies of the EU, Russia, and Pakistan. Above all, the starting point of building a big, strong grand strategy will be, or what you can call the first leg of India's grand strategy will be economic power. The $3 trillion economy going on 5 and then on 10, India needs to think about, craft, and execute its own grand strategy in the economic context first. As a country that will be the world's third largest within this decade, India will need to rethink the way it pursues its interests and engages with the rest of the world. The two feed each other, as the previous speaker just mentioned. If we want a greater play, for instance, in the global multilateral institutions, we should be strong enough domestically. The last leg of creating and debating India's grand strategy will have to be framed within and anchored to the question, who are we? That is, as Amish mentioned earlier, understanding that India is an old civilization but a new country. The strategic wisdom of the past must inform India as it negotiates a complex world tomorrow. There are deep grand strategy insights that India in the 21st centuries can glean and adapt from the ancient past to power its future vision. In a line, it's time for India to start thinking about, crafting, and executing its own grand strategy.
Great. I think that sets the stage for what we are looking for in the coming, 20 years or 40 years. But over to you, Manjeet, for your minute or minute and a half, and then I'll come in there.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Is that
Yes.
a sound okay? Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think for India to find a place in the new world order, it needs to look at itself from within. We need to build intellectual capacity, and that includes scholarship, institution building. On scholarship in particular, I will say we have lots of new private colleges coming up. That's really fantastic. We need to get more exchanges, places in universities for foreign professors to teach and foreign students. We need lots of them from the West in particular for the narrative to change, because the English language media dominates the discourse. And also from Japan, from our own region in Asia. The Ministry of External Affairs does some of it, but not enough. We need the private colleges to start just attracting them naturally. Secondly, we need to build residences for scholars. And these are postgraduate institutions, for economists, for social scientists, for philosophers to come spend 3 months in India, write books. These are the ambassadors of India when they go back to their countries and they change the narrative. Secondly, we've got a fantastic product. This is an intellectual engagement with India. We've got India Stack. This is a public good, and it is a change. It's going to change the model of the digital world. We have not been able to use India Stack as an Indian product. Just now, there's a huge battle going on in the world with China state-owned model with digitization. In the US, it's a company-owned model. Europe is neither here nor there. They haven't really started a company of their own. But India has this, and it is from our software. So we need to start, especially Ministry of External Affairs, I think needs to start talking up this fantastic model that is an equalizer for the world. And lastly, we need to get a good multilateral in India. And this is not just the Solar Alliance. We need to start setting up something like the BRICS Research Institute, in India, where we can get lots and lots of economists to come in. And this has to be outside of Delhi. We cannot have a Delhi-centric India narrative. We just cannot. It has to be in Mumbai, the financial center. It has to be in Chennai. It has to be in Bangalore. We need these multilateral research institutions where we can put our own ideas coming out from the developing world, so that other developing countries, Brazil has fantastic economists, Hungary has great economists. We need all these people to come to India to sit here and work for years on end and create new ideas, new narratives.
Great. In fact, that really gives me an opportunity to talk about what I thought would be one grand idea, and that is building India's own narratives, building media platforms, and not just one platform to tell the India story with a global outlook. I think the Indian narrative has been run for so long from elsewhere. That needs to change. And I think if we have to do all three of you have said before me, that story needs to be sold in a manner that the world understands, and it doesn't come from other arbiters from the West. We also need to have more and more Indians learning the Mandarin language, because that's going to be another competition that is coming up. English we are strong in, but if we get equally large number of Mandarin speakers and people who understand China, which is going to be a most important country either way, as a competitor, as a country that cooperates with India on some of the issues, we need to have that, because this narrative building has to change. And just giving one example, China today has 170 odd bureaus worldwide of just the Xinhua news agency. Compare that with India. We don't have anybody reporting the world from elsewhere. We are reporting the world from India. That must change. That money that it has to be invested not just by the government but also by the private sector. So we need to manage our own narrative to control our own destiny. Is what my grand idea is. So I think now we should open up for a larger discussion. And again, we'll go in that order. We have, I think, another 20 minutes to go. So all of you can start. I mean, if Ambassador Akbaruddin can start, and then we can come again in the same order and discuss whatever we have discussed so far, and have a reaction to that maybe, or put your own ideas ahead of in front of this audience here who have joined from various parts of the world. Over to you.
Thank you, Nitin. And let me begin with your idea of a narrative. A narrative building is a long-term investment. It's not going to come if we invest one time. In fact, it will have to be over the next 20 or so years. What we've done over the last 20 or so years is we've become more insular in terms of narrative building. Look at, for example, our leading agency, PTI. It used to have correspondents in several other places. Today, it shrunk. The world, look at our newspapers. We are thinking that the world is only, if you look at the international aspects of our newspapers, they cover maybe 10% or 15 or 20%, and nothing of interest to developing India. For example, the Gulf. We have 7 million people of Indian origin or Indians in the Gulf. How much is reported about them in our newspapers? So it needs a shift of thinking. We need to be less insular. As we've grown economically, unfortunately, we are becoming more insular. We need to be more open-minded, invest in the broader terms. If we have to reposition ourselves, partly it will have to be done in India, as was said, economically, but partly it will also have to be engagements globally, as was said by Dr. Kriplani, and the idea of a grand strategy. Yes, without a grand strategy, we are nowhere, because big powers have big aspirations, big plans, and big hopes. Unless we work on those, we will be nowhere, because there are so many others who are already plotting the next 100 years, the next 200 years. These opportunities come once in a century, perhaps. In the last century, they came twice, one after the First World War, one after the Second World War. And after that, they haven't come. This is our chance. We shouldn't let go of that opportunity. On all three counts, I support all three of you. Thank you.
Sure. Gautam?
So I think, I don't think, I'm certain. I'm certain that I agree with all of you. And I want to question the underlying. Mr. Akbaruddin said we need to spend more in multilateral agencies, United Nations, and so on. Manjeet said we need more research institutions and such like. You said that media needs to go global, all of which requires money. You know something? Even that underlying is changing. Without money, we cannot move forward. And for the first time that I have been tracking the economy in my career and even historical readings of whatever I have done of independent India, it is the first time that we have a serving prime minister who has said that wealth creation is a virtue. People must work towards it. You can't keep painting all wealth creators in the black. They create jobs, they create value, they create wealth, and they deliver taxes. From the taxes, Akbaruddinji's aspirations will get fulfilled in terms of getting investing globally. From the other parts of the money, Manjeet will, as they create wealth, Nitin, the media conglomerates we can expect large conglomerates to rise from India, some of which have already begun to do the work. Let me give you one small change that is required domestically, so that, to me, all this is part of a grand strategy. These are all international footprints, but they are based out of hard economics within. So let me tell you the challenges that India faces. Of my own grand strategy, I'm going to now critique it, which is that for doing business, there are 1,400 laws that Indian entrepreneurs need to negotiate. These are state as well as union laws. There are 6,000 annual filings that businesses need to do at an aggregate. Each filing has scores and scores, sometimes 100 individual data points that need to be done. There are 70,000 compliances, 70,000, I repeat, compliances that businesses have to undertake at an aggregate every year. These compliances change at the rate of around, I think, 2,000 per annum. 2,000 per quarter. They keep changing. With such a regulatory infrastructure, I don't know how wealth will come, but given the Prime Minister's direction and the actions that have preceded and are ongoing, I hope many of these things will change. Once we have this, when we think of a grand strategy, it cannot be thought of only in terms of engaging with the world. We have to engage with the rest of the world on their terms as well. We have to compete with them. In order to make that competition, in order to attract investments, to give you a small sliver of what I'm talking about, we need to ensure that people come, they are not harassed, there is no excessive bureaucracy, there is no corruption. For all of that, we need to rethink our domestic legislations. As far as the grand strategies go, these are also there is a changing chessboard. I think after Balakot, for instance, on the military side in Pakistan, India has certainly changed its stance, foreign policy stance, that we are not going to sit back and get killed anymore. If you act or you behave in a manner that that works with terrorists, for instance, I have harsher words which I will refrain from using in this public platform right now. But you will get it back at a compounded rate. With China, we have been able to do that as well. Do you think they're going to change? I doubt it. The signals of peace today are nice. They must be pursued, but I don't think it's going to change. So our grand strategy cannot just lean on what we wish from them. US, until the previous disposition, suppose we leaned on the US grand strategy as a direction, it would not serve us the same in the new administration. So our grand strategy, even when we engage with other nations, has to be flexible, has to be India first, as the rest of the strategies are, and we need to be very nimble-footed.
True. Manjeet, your thoughts on any of these ideas that all of us have spoken about?
Yes, so I'm going to start with you, Nitin. I think that what you said about journalism is absolutely true. What we need and what we don't have is lots and lots of journalism schools. There are very few of them, and the way they teach is extremely old-fashioned. There was a new media school that was started a few years ago and had to be shut down in 2 years. I know because I was sort of associated with it. In 2 years, we started in Delhi because we couldn't get any other funding apart from government funding. So we need to start getting the private sector and to get involved. You know, Rupert Murdoch makes so much money in India. He started a Murdoch University in Australia. There is no reason why he can't spend $10 million and start a journalism school. I mean, this helps everybody. It helps the quality of journalism, and it should be digital, up to date. There is no reason why they can't do it. And these should be not just in English. We need it in English, but most important, we need it in the regional languages. And there's plenty of help for this because everybody knows how important journalists are. And I think now with the digital companies being forced to pay the media for using their news, this will really help the media companies become, get a better financial base. So that is absolutely true, and we need to do that largely in second-tier cities and third-tier cities, right? Even Bangladesh has a very good model of photographers, screening photographers and little radio journalists in their rural areas, so the big rural news everywhere. So Ambassador Akbaruddin, even for positioning our people in areas where we have a large diaspora, you're absolutely right. It's not that difficult. We just need to be organized with it. Secondly, to talk to Ambassador Akbaruddin, the junior professional officers, India doesn't, I don't even know whether we have so many of these officers in the UN. And so these are young officers that countries place in the UN when they're 25 years old, and they stay with the system, but then they become embedded in the system. And China has done this very, very successfully. So even right now, China has, you're right, they plan ahead. And I think out of 40 UN agencies, China has people embedded in the top 10 in 22 of them. I mean, that is astonishing. India has only 12. And I know that India fights a valiant fight in the UN with very few people. We really always we do more with very little. And that is the India story, which is, a quest for the best for the least. But we really have to do better at that. And we need to start. We need to teach our young people not just development in the UN. That's not what it is. Just now, and this, Ambassador, with the Belt and Road Initiative, China does $350 million in assessed contributions, which is what it has to give to the UN. But then it's more than $1 billion more in voluntary contributions. So the Bill Gates and Miller Foundation, I mean, they give money to the UN. It's tremendous amount of influence because the UN just doesn't have that money. So can our philanthropic institutions also start giving that kind of money so that we can have a say in what goes on globally? Or, Ambassador, does this need to change? And Gautam, I'll come back to you in the next round.
Yeah. Okay. So let me take up Gautam's idea about legislation and the compliances and thing. And you're absolutely right. I was speaking to some Taiwanese diplomats and some industries, and Taiwanese are very keen, for instance, to move out of China because they've had a long history of being in China in terms of manufacturing and the skills that they have. They want to move out. They want to come to India, and of course there are other competing nations like Vietnam and maybe even Korea. But they know that the scale is much higher and much larger in India, so they want to come to India. But they run up against a wall in India about all these compliances and permissions and licenses that they need. And because these companies in Taiwan are all mostly SMEs, they find it very difficult, and they were looking for answers that what could one do here. So I think that change needs to come. Your idea about trying to ease of doing business to be in place needs to be really embedded, needs to spread across the states, and it's not the center alone that can do it. I mean, that's the other issue. If we have different legislations, different rules and regulations in different states, it's very difficult for them to understand if they're coming from outside. If we need investment, if we need people to come and set up facilities here, then it needs to be at least some uniformity in rules and laws and the kind of permissions that are needed. And that is how these people will go back and become the ambassadors for our narrative of how India is changing or has changed in terms of ease of doing business. But that is not happening. I think we need to do a little more on that count. That's the idea that I thought I will give. And just to give an example of how money plays a big part in narrative setting. The Chinese spend something like $6 billion in support of their media, the official media organs that they have, Xinhua, CGTN, and even the Global Times, which of course is a hound dog. But that's where they spend that money. And $10 billion on spreading soft power. India has a natural advantage of soft power through Bollywood, through our cultural outreach, at least in Southeast Asian countries and elsewhere. But we have not taken advantage of that head start that we've had before. So I think we need to relook at what we have, what kind of money we can spend, and why we should spend money. As Ambassador Akbaruddin said, if you have to have influence in the UN, then we also need to spend that money, because after all, whoever pays can call the shots or at least have a larger influence. I think that's where I think we need to change our narrative, because creating narratives, I completely agree with you, Ambassador Akbaruddin, that it's not an overnight job. It takes time, does not happen by accident. It needs planning, It needs a forethought or a kind of roadmap for the next 20 years. Are we prepared to do that? Are we even thinking of that? Is something that we must ask ourselves and the audience here. Because if India is going to rise, is rising, then India also needs to have concurrent instruments of giving that narrative to the world, or at least spreading that narrative to the world. I think I'll stop here, but again, we might have about last 5 minutes we have. So maybe
So,
last.
may I just interrupt
Yes.
here?
Yes,
I have a
please.
question for Manjeet as well as for Mr. Akbaruddin and you. Are we being so? India has been distracted by wars, by terror, etc. Is narrative the new distraction? My question is not that why we should, you mentioned journalism, schools, Manjeet. Akbaruddinji mentioned that the narrative part, your entire presentation is on building new narratives and so on. And I'm just saying that, and this is refers to Akbaruddinji, if G2G engagements and G2C engagements, G2G means governments are generally very friendly with India. G2C means corporations are coming. In the last 1 year, we have seen the highest FDIs come into India. So if G2G and G2C engagements are positive, do we really need a narrative? Yeah, let some people squeal and scream and shout. Who cares? By the way, I'm a believer in narrative. I think we should have a positive narrative. But I'm just saying, for the sake of practical things and with the large amounts of investments envisaged, don't you think we would be better off, as Manjeet said, having more professionals in the UN, more officers there, rather than spending money on building narratives and trying to counter some false discussions, as we did yesterday in the human rights conference?
So a couple of quick responses to several interesting issues. First, let me try and respond to Dr. Kriplani. One, I agree that we may have to have an international organization based in India, but I don't agree that we should dump the International Solar Alliance. It's like throwing the baby with the bathwater. Let me give you why. Very quick reasons. Climate change is going to be a major issue. Energy and renewable energy is going to be a major issue, both domestically and globally. We are well positioned in that, both in terms of facts on the ground, data, because we've increased our renewables multifold, but also in terms of the narrative. Yes, I acknowledge that it's not been functioning like an international organization, but we need to rectify that. Instead of throwing that, somebody else will appropriate it. This is an opportunity to build on it, rectify its errors, and then proceed forward. Let's not give up that asset that we have. True, it's not worked out well. Again, I said I'll be the first to acknowledge that it has many shortcomings, but it's a glamorous asset. It's an underutilized asset. We need to build on it. That's number one. Number two is about this whole concept of whether narrative is or not important. My view is that investment across the board is important. And it's not a choice that we have. It's a necessity across the board, because it will, in the longer term, reduce your investments in other things. Narrative does make it easier to reap rewards. It's like a beauty queen and a muscular wrestler. The beauty queen wins the votes all the time. So let's try, even if we become a muscular wrestler, we need to try to have some aspects of the beauty queen. So let's not discard narrative totally. It's an important aspect, may or may not be the most important, but beauty queens win beauty contests. So let's not discard them. I'll leave it at that because we're running out of time.
We're running out of time. We've got last 1 minute. So I'll urge you, Mr. Akbaruddin, to sort of wind up your remarks, and then maybe I'll just make one half a minute intervention here.
No, I will not take my time further. I yield to you.
Okay, I'll just say we are speaking today on the second anniversary of the air attack from Pakistan on 27th February 2019 following the Balakot airstrike. Just look at the two competing narratives or two contrasting narratives on 26th of February 2019 when India went and attacked Balakot camp of Jaish-e-Mohammed. What happened that day and what happened on 27th of February 2019. Two contrasting. India won the war of narratives on the first day, lost the war of narratives on the second day. Important to direct all that. But I'm not going to waste time on that. But Manjeet, if you have you got 30 seconds to make your final remarks, and then maybe Gautam can have the last word.
Okay, so Gautam, this is to your points. I think that India's private sector needs to do a lot more. It needs to put its shoulder to the wheel now. They did it when, after year 2000, when Indian software was on the rise. These very same Indian software companies that have so much trust in the world, they're plugged into the guts of global corporations and they're highly trusted, but they are not doing enough to take India's narrative forward. They're just not doing. They're happy earning money. Purchase by purchase, it used to be $25 for 25% returns. Now it's less, but they're still not doing more. We need corporate India to put its shoulder to the wheel and tell the story of India like they used to, because they carry weight and they have credibility.
Great. Gautam, last word to you when we wind up here.
Yeah, so I don't want to make any concluding remark, but I'll just answer your query of that India won the action war, but lost the narrative war. I think hard power comes before soft power. So as we are entering which is what's my point to Mr. Akbaruddin as well. So in a G to G or M to M, military to military, if India is winning that narrative or that war, crafting a narrative is the easy part. Manjeet says that private sector needs to come and craft that narrative. But whenever the corporate people get into media, the allegations are independent media is being smothered. So I think as India, as a larger citizenry, we need to decide are corporates good or bad. Thankfully, Modi has said they are good. So let's move with that. I agree with you, Manjeet. I agree with you. It's just that I'm not certain if the action.
Thank you all for joining, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Data reveals Tathya 2021. Do keep watching, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh my God, that was quite something. I felt so proud of India as a nation listening to these bright minds. With this kind of a focus, we are on a path of becoming Vishwaguru. If you agree with me, tweet, coo, and post using the hashtag Tathya 2021 and tell the speakers what you liked from their discussion.